moving on from what Bob said, attend to folks' needs. Who are the folks? So far, I've listened to quite a few presentations, and I've heard about the user. But there are other stakeholders, which I discovered back in 2005 when I read this particular paper about the onion model, and I'd like to share the onion model for stakeholder analysis with you today. So the 4 generic levels are, you start off with the product or service, the thing that you are concerned about. And it contains no stakeholders. This is key and important. The next one is the system level, the system of interest, and that contains a set of stakeholders. Above that is the containing system, particularly this is where the beneficiaries of the system are located. And then there's the wider environment. And this is Ian Alexander's idea. You can look it up on the web. So the stakeholder roles are beneficiaries, negative stakeholders, regulatory, operator, and expert. And then they're further broken down into the financial beneficiary, the functional beneficiary, political, purchasing, etc., etc. So we've got all these wonderful stakeholders, and we've got to put them within the onion model. So the first layer is those things that actually touch the product, the system. So that's the normal operator or the users as we talked about them. There's also support. Don't forget support. And also don't forget maintenance as well. So those are the inner layer, the people who actually physically touch the system. The next one out are, first of all, the most important one is the functional beneficiary, who benefits from actually the system being used, but doesn't necessarily actually touch the system. You've also then got the sponsor and champion who wants that product. I suppose product owner would be the term here. There's also the purchaser, the seller, and other interfacing systems. And then the outside layer are other beneficiaries, like the political beneficiary. Believe it or not, for most systems, there is somewhere a politician, may not only be an elected one, who's looking to get some kudos out of what's happening. There's the very important one, bottom left, the consultant. Really important stakeholder. I just thought I'd get a dig in there. Don't forget your negative stakeholders on the top right. There are people who don't want your product or your service or your process to perform. So those are the levels in the roles. So let's have some examples. It's AgileByExamples. And this is the first one. This is basically, it's a Norwegian tank. So you've got the commander, the gunner, the loader. They are the main users, but you've got to maintain it. You've got to maintain the C4I systems. You've got a resupply system. And then you've also got operational support who will give you new fuel, new operators, medical support, all those sort of things. And then they support a higher level in the higher echelons, other functional users. And at the very top, you've got the Norwegian army. So that's just, that's a self-propelled gun. There's a subsystem in there called OTAS, and now notice the gunner is now the functional beneficiary. The gunner doesn't actually touch this OTAS system. You've got the OTAS operator, so you can dive in deeper and deeper within your system breakdown. But it also works for a service. Now notice it's not the normal user now, it's the service provider, and it's a service beneficiary. But it works perfectly well for services. It works perfectly well for a process, where you have a practitioner of a process maintainer, a process support, etc. So it can be easily adapted to the situation you're in. You can document it as ordinary boring tables. You may want to give the stakeholder types as well. But I like to have a stakeholder ontology and actually draw relationships, basically hierarchical, going down the levels. Validation. Once you've got a model, you have to validate it. How do you validate it? Well, it's very simple. You present the model to the stakeholders and says, is it right? You present it to your customer and says, is this right? You present it to your team and say, is that right? But of course, the last instance is you employ me to review it for you. What do you do with it? This is key and crucial. It doesn't sit there. What happens is, when you've done this, it becomes the subjects for your user stories. So you now say, the commander, as a commander, I want to, as a loader, as a gunner, as a stakeholder, I want to. And make sure that all your stakeholder needs have been identified by doing good stakeholder analysis. Thank you very much.